My name is Jason, 25 years old, and I never expected to come home from work to find my entire life stuffed into garbage bags at the front gate. My mother, Barbara, stood there, arms crossed, flanked by my siblings with cold, distant expressions. "You are 25, get out now," she declared, without a hint of remorse. What shocked them most was my response. I smiled calmly, got into my car, and drove away without argument. 6 months later, my phone would be flooded with 60 desperate messages from her. "Where are you?" Before I dive into this life-changing story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button to join me on this journey of heartbreak and unexpected freedom. I grew up in Meadowbrook, a middle-class suburb outside of Boston, where every house looked similar enough to feel like you were trapped in some architect's lazy copy-paste project. Our home was the light blue one with white shutters. Nothing special from the outside and increasingly toxic on the inside as the years went by. My father, Richard, was the buffer between my mother and the rest of us kids. He was a kind man who worked as an electrical engineer, always bringing home small gadgets for me to take apart and put back together. "You have got the mind of an inventor, Jason," he would tell me with a proud smile that made me feel 10 feet tall. Those moments in his small home workshop were my sanctuary, especially as I began to notice how differently my mother treated me compared to my siblings. When Dad died of a sudden heart attack when I was 12, everything changed. The light in our house dimmed and the warmth went with him. Mom retreated into herself for months, barely acknowledging any of us. When she finally emerged from her grief, she was different, harder, more controlling, and for some reason I never fully understood, resentful toward me. Maybe it was because I looked so much like my father. Maybe it was because I was the oldest, and was suddenly expected to be the man of the house while simultaneously being treated like I was perpetually disappointing her. Whatever the reason, the dynamic was clear. Amy, Michael, and Megan were her precious children, and I was the obligation. As we all moved through our teen years, the pattern solidified. Amy, just 3 years younger than me, became Mom's confidant. They would sit at the kitchen table, whispering and laughing conversations that would abruptly stop when I entered the room. Michael, despite his rebellious phase, still received unconditional support and endless second chances for every scrape he got into. And Megan, the baby of the family, was absolutely coddled, never hearing the word no from Mom's lips. Meanwhile, I was the one expected to drive everyone to their activities, help with homework, and fix whatever broke around the house. When I got a scholarship to the state university, Mom's response was, "Well, at least we will not have to pay for it." When Amy got a partial scholarship to a private college 2 years later, Mom threw her a party and took on extra shifts at the hospital where she worked as a nurse to cover the remaining tuition. I tried not to let it bother me. I focused on my education, majoring in computer science, and finding genuine joy in the world of coding and problem solving. Technology made sense, in a way family dynamics did not. It followed logical rules and gave predictable results when you put in the work. By 22, I had graduated and found a job at a local tech startup called Nexus Wave. The pay was not great at first, but I loved the work and the creative environment. More importantly, it was a place where my ideas were valued and my contributions recognized, something I had never experienced at home. For 3 years, I continued living at home, telling myself it was the practical choice while I built up savings and paid off my small student loans. In reality, there was part of me that still craved my mother's approval, still hoped that someday she would see me the way she saw her other children. The day before everything fell apart was supposed to be special. I had just received a significant promotion at work, moving up to lead developer with a substantial raise. Marcus, the company founder, had taken me aside with genuine enthusiasm. "You are the backbone of this operation, Jason. This promotion is long overdue." For the first time in years, I felt a surge of optimism about sharing news with my family. I stopped at the grocery store on the way home and bought ingredients to cook a celebration dinner for everyone, something my father used to do when he had good news to share. The scene in the kitchen that evening was exactly as I had pictured it in my mind. The smell of garlic and herbs filling the house. My siblings gradually drifting in, attracted by the aroma, and even my mother raising an eyebrow with mild brotered interest. "What is the occasion?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe as I stirred the pasta sauce. "Got some good news today," I replied, trying to keep my voice casual, though my heart was racing with anticipation. Thought we could have a nice dinner together. Once everyone was seated and served, I shared my announcement I got promoted to lead developer today. It comes with a team of 5 people to manage and a 40% raise. The silence that followed lasted just a beat too long before Amy said, "What exactly does a lead developer do again? Is that like IT support or something?" I explained the role, patiently talking about project management and system architecture, watching their eyes glaze over with disinterest. Michael checked his phone under the table. Megan twirled pasta around her fork with theatrical boredom, but it was my mother's response that deflated any remaining hope I had. "Well," she said after taking a small bite of food, "I suppose it is good you are finally making progress in your little computer job. Amy just got accepted to that nursing residency program in Chicago, you know, following in my footsteps." And just like that, my achievement was dismissed, and the conversation pivoted entirely to Amy's accomplishment, one I had not even been told about. I sat there, fork suspended midair, as they launched into an animated discussion about Amy's plans for moving, completely forgetting that this dinner was supposed to be my celebration. That night, lying in my childhood bed that my legs now hung off the end of, I stared at the ceiling and confronted some uncomfortable truths. I had spent 25 years trying to earn the love and recognition that should have been freely given. I had remained in this house far too long, making excuses about practicality when the real reason was much more painful to admit. I was still that 12-year-old boy desperate for his mother's approval after his father died. I fell asleep with a new resolution forming in my mind. It was time to start looking for my own place to build a life where I was valued. Little did I know that the universe had already set those wheels in motion, but not in the way I had planned. The next morning, the house was unusually quiet when I woke up. Normally, weekday mornings were a chaotic orchestra of shower schedules, coffee brewing, and people rushing out the door. That morning, there was nothing but silence. I should have recognized it as the calm before the storm. The workday passed in a blur of meetings and coding sprints. My new role came with increased responsibilities, and I was determined to prove Marcus right for promoting me. I stayed an hour later than usual, fixing a stubborn bug that had been plaguing our main application. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the sun was already setting, casting long shadows across our front yard. The first sign that something was wrong was the empty driveway. Usually, at least one of my siblings' cars would be parked there. The second sign was the collection of black garbage bags clustered near the front gate, spilling over onto the walkway. From a distance, it looked like someone was finally cleaning out the garage, a project my mother had been talking about for months. As I approached, my mother emerged from the front door, her face set in that familiar expression of disapproval I had grown so accustomed to over the years. Behind her, like reluctant backup dancers, came Amy, Michael, and Megan, each wearing varying expressions that ranged from smug satisfaction to uncomfortable avoidance. "What is going on?" I asked, gesturing toward the bags. "Are we finally cleaning out the garage?" "No, Jason," my mother replied, her voice cold and measured. "Those are your things. All of them." I laughed, certain this was some kind of bizarre joke. "Very funny. What is this really about?" "This is not a joke. You are 25 years old. It is time for you to get out of my house and live on your own like an adult." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I looked at my siblings for some sign of support, but Amy was examining her manicure with exaggerated interest. Michael was staring at his shoes, and only Megan had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable with the situation. "You are kicking me out just like that." With no warning, my voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and hollow. Warning, my mother scoffed. "I have been dropping hints for months. Your promotion yesterday was the final sign. You have no excuse to keep leeching off me now." The unfairness of it all crashed over me in waves. I had never leeched off her. I bought my own groceries, paid for my own gas and car insurance, and had even offered to pay rent multiple times, which she had refused because family does not pay rent to family. That rule apparently only applied to my siblings, who cycled in and out of the house between semesters, jobs, and relationships without ever facing this kind of ultimatum. I walked closer to the garbage bags, feeling numb, as I realized these really were my possessions, carelessly shoved into cheap black plastic like literal trash. Some of the bags had torn, revealing books and clothes spilling onto the concrete. My childhood telescope, a gift from my father, lay partially exposed, its main lens cracked down the middle. "You broke my telescope," I said quietly, bending down to examine it. "It must have happened when we were packing," Amy interjected, not sounding remotely apologetic. "You should be grateful we packed for you at all." I began to look through the other bags, taking inventory of my life as categorized by my family clothes, books, electronics, mementos. With growing horror, I realized something important was missing. "Where is Dad's watch?" I asked, my voice sharper now as I turned to face them. "The vintage Omega he left me. It was in my desk drawer." A fleeting look passed between my mother and Amy. "That watch is valuable," my mother said dismissively. "Consider it payment for the 25 years of housing and food I provided you." Something inside me, something that had been bending and stretching for years without breaking, finally snapped. The watch had been my father's prized possession, the one thing he specifically left to me in his will. It was not just about its monetary value. It was the last tangible connection I had to him. In that moment, standing amidst the garbage bags containing my hastily packed life, I saw my family clearly for the first time. My mother's face, normally so controlled, showed a flash of something I had never recognized before: jealousy. Perhaps of the bond I had shared with my father, or of the potential I had to build a life beyond the small, petty world she had created. Amy stood slightly behind her, a mirror image of my mother's righteous indignation. Michael continued to avoid eye contact, a follower who would never stand up to the family power structure. Only Megan looked torn, her young face troubled, as she witnessed this ugly scene unfolding. I expected to feel rage, to feel the need to scream and argue and demand the watch back. Instead, I felt something entirely unexpected: relief. A profound, sweeping sense of liberation washed over me. This forced eviction was actually setting me free from a house that had never truly been a home, from people who had never truly been my family in the ways that mattered most. "You know what? Keep the watch," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "It is just a thing, and things can be replaced." My mother's expression faltered slightly, thrown by my lack of resistance. She had clearly expected tears, begging, anger, anything but this strange calmness. "You need to leave now," she insisted, recovering quickly. "We have had enough of your ungrateful attitude." I looked at her for a long moment, seeing the stranger she had become after my father died. "I am not ungrateful, Mom. I am just finally seeing things clearly." I began loading the garbage bags into my car, working methodically and in silence. Some were too torn to move, so I had to transfer their contents directly into my trunk and back seat. The whole time my family stood watching, as if making sure I would actually leave. When the last bag was loaded, I found myself smiling, a genuine smile that seemed to unnerve them even more than my calmness had. "Goodbye," I said, simply getting into my car. "Do not come crawling back when you fail," my mother called out, needing to have the last word. I did not respond. I just started the engine, backed out of the driveway, and drove away from the only home I had ever known, filled with an unexpected sense of possibility rather than despair. As I turned the corner at the end of our street, I caught a glimpse of them in my rearview mirror, my mother with her arms crossed tightly across her chest, Amy mirroring her posture, Michael already turning to go back inside, and Megan the Pock, only one, still watching me leave her hand half raised in what might have been a wave. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years it felt like it was actually leading somewhere. The reality of my situation hit me about 20 minutes after I drove away from my childhood home. Sitting at a red light, gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. I realized I had nowhere to go. No plan, no prepared apartment waiting for me. Just a car full of hastily packed garbage bags and the clothes on my back. The first night was spent at the Pinewood Motel, a rundown establishment on the outskirts of town that charged by the hour but did not ask questions. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and industrial cleaner, and the bedspread had suspicious stains I tried not to think about. I brought in only what I needed for the night, leaving most of my possessions locked in my car. Once alone in that dingy room, the composure I had maintained in front of my family crumbled. I sat on the edge of the bed and sobbed, deep guttural cries that seemed to come from some wounded animal place inside me. I wept, For the 12-year-old boy who lost his father, for the teenager who tried so hard to be good enough, for the young man who kept hoping for love from people incapable of giving it. When the tears finally subsided, I did the only thing I could think to do. I called Trevor, my best friend since freshman year of college. "Dude, what is wrong?" "You sound terrible," he said immediately upon answering. Through a voice still thick with emotion, I explained what had happened. Trevor listened without interrupting, a quality that had always made him easy to talk to. "Get your ass over here," he said when I finished. "The couch is yours for as long as you need it." Trevor's apartment was small, a one-bedroom place he shared with his enormous Maine Coon cat, Fitzgerald, but it felt safe in a way the motel room had not. That night, lying on his slightly lumpy couch with Fitzgerald purring on my chest, I fell into an exhausted, dreamless sleep. The next morning I had to face reality. I needed to go to work. I showered quickly, put on the least wrinkled clothes I could find in my bags, and headed to the office, hoping I could keep my personal crisis from affecting my professional life. I almost made it through the day without anyone noticing something was wrong. Almost. "You look like you have been hit by a truck," Marcus commented, stopping by my desk late in the afternoon. "Everything okay?" "Just some family stuff," I replied vaguely, keeping my eyes fixed on my monitor. Marcus, mid-30s, perpetually dressed in jeans and vintage band t-shirts, despite being worth millions from his previous startup, leaned against my desk. Family stuff often translates to serious shit, in my experience. "Need to take some time off?" "No," I said quickly. Work is good. I need to be here." He studied me for a moment longer than was comfortable. "My office door is open if you need to talk. Or drink. I keep the good scotch in the bottom drawer." I thanked him, touched by the offer but not ready to share the humiliating details of my eviction with my boss, no matter how cool he was. That evening, back at Trevor's place, we began the depressing task of inventorying what my family had packed and what they had forgotten. Clothes mostly there. Books, about half of them. My laptop and desktop computer thankfully included. Personal mementos largely missing. The vintage comic book collection my father and I had built together gone. The framed photography prints I had taken during a road trip after graduation, nowhere to be found. They were thorough in their cruelty, Trevor observed as we sat surrounded by the debris of my life. This was not a rushed job. They deliberately kept things they knew would hurt you to lose. "I keep thinking about Dad's watch," I admitted, staring at the ceiling. "He wanted me to have it. He specifically left it to me. And she just took it." "That is straight-up theft," Trevor said bluntly. "You could probably take legal action." I shook my head. "Not worth it. I just want to move forward." Over the next few days, Trevor helped me establish a routine. Morning shower, coffee work. Evenings apartment hunting, online budget calculations, microwave dinners. The rhythm was comforting, even as the circumstances were not. On my third night there, Trevor finally convinced me to really talk about my family. "You never said much about how bad it was at home," he said, handing me a beer. "I knew your mom was difficult, but this is next-level toxic." The beer was cold against my palm, the condensation gathering under my fingers. I guess I was embarrassed. And part of me did not want to admit how bad it was even to myself. "That is how they get you," Trevor said. "They normalize the abnormal until you question your own reality." "Gaslighting," I murmured. "Textbook case," he agreed. "So when did it start? Was she always like this?" I told him everything then, about my father's death, about the clear favoritism, about the years of subtle undermining and emotional manipulation, about how my accomplishments were minimized while my siblings were celebrated, about the unpaid labor, the constant criticism, the slow erosion of my self-worth. "Jesus, Jason," Trevor said when I finished, "you have not been living in a home. You have been living in an abusive situation." The word abusive made me flinch. It seemed too strong, too dramatic for what I had experienced. There had been no physical violence, no screaming matches, just the constant, quiet diminishment of my existence. "Emotional abuse is still abuse," Trevor said, reading my expression. "And from what you have described, your mother is an expert at it." That night marked a turning point. Naming what I had experienced gave me a framework to understand it. I was not crazy, or oversensitive, or ungrateful. I had been systematically mistreated by the people who should have loved me most. The next day I viewed my first potential apartment, a basement unit with questionable plumbing, and a landlord who kept emphasizing that the occasional cockroach was normal for this neighborhood. I left the viewing feeling defeated suddenly. Understanding why so many people stayed in bad situations, freedom was expensive. Work became my refuge during this time. There at least I had value. My code worked, or it did not. My solutions helped the company, or they did not. The metrics were clear, the feedback straightforward. I threw myself into the new project I was leading. Staying late, coming in early. Finding comfort in the logical world of programming, where inputs reliably produced expected outputs. By the end of my first week of homelessness, I had viewed 6 apartments, all either wildly beyond my budget or alarmingly substandard. Trevor assured me I could stay with him as long as necessary, but I could see the strain my presence was putting on his small space and routine. The weekend arrived, and with it a revelation I needed to expand my search beyond the immediate area. There were smaller towns within commuting distance where rent might be more affordable. With this new strategy in mind, I felt a spark of hope for the first time since seeing those garbage bags at the gate. 2 weeks after my unceremonious eviction, I signed a lease on a small 1-bedroom apartment in Riverside, a modest town about 30 minutes from my workplace. The apartment was nothing special. Basic appliances, beige walls and carpet that had seen better days. But it was clean, functional, and most importantly, mine. Moving day was a revelation. Trevor showed up with his pickup truck, and to my surprise, so did 2 of my coworkers, Derek and Allison. They had overheard me mentioning the move to Trevor when he stopped by the office and volunteered to help without me even asking. "Work family is still family," Derek said simply when I thanked him, a statement that hit me harder than he could have known. My new home came together piece by piece. Trevor contributed a coffee table he had been storing in his parents' garage. Derek and Allison surprised me with a housewarming gift, a decent set of pots and pans because no adult should live on microwave dinners. Marcus, upon learning about my situation through office gossip, called me into his office and handed me an envelope containing a relocation bonus that was clearly just his way of helping, without wounding my pride. The first night alone in my own apartment was a strange mix of emotions. Sitting on my second-hand couch eating takeout straight from the container, I felt both intensely lonely and incredibly free. No one would comment on what I was eating or when. No one would sigh dramatically if I left a dish in the sink overnight. No one would make me feel like an unwelcome guest in my own home. During those first weeks, I realized how many basic life skills I had never properly learned. Laundry I could handle, but cooking beyond the absolute basics was a mystery. Budgeting for household supplies caught me off guard. Who knew toilet paper was so expensive? YouTube became my instructor for everything from how to unclog a drain to how to make a week's worth of meals from cheap ingredients. What surprised me most during this time was the complete silence from my family. No calls, no texts, not even an email asking if I was alive. I had expected at least some form of contact, perhaps my mother calling to gloat or Amy reaching out to justify their actions. The total radio silence was both a relief and a deeper cut than I had anticipated. About 3 weeks into my new independent life, I met Rachel. She lived in the apartment across the hall, a kindergarten teacher with a quick laugh and a habit of humming Broadway show tunes while collecting her mail. Our first interaction was brief, just a casual hello as we both struggled with groceries at the same time, but there was something about her straightforward friendliness that stuck with me. Our next meeting came when I locked myself out of my apartment after taking out the trash. First time she asked, finding me sitting dejectedly outside my door. "Is it that obvious?" "The look of self-directed rage is universal," she laughed. "Come wait in my place while the super brings the master key. I just made tea." That hour in Rachel's apartment, which was decorated in vibrant colors that made mine look even more beige by comparison, was the most normal social interaction I had experienced in weeks. We talked about our jobs, our favorite movies, the questionable reliability of the building's washing machines. She did not ask about my family or my past. and I was grateful for the absence of those complicated topics. At work, things were moving faster than I had expected. The project I was leading turned out to be for a major potential client, and Marcus was increasingly relying on me to make critical decisions. "You have got good instincts," he told me after a particularly challenging problem-solving session. "That is not something that can be taught." My first paycheck after the promotion arrived, and with it came a profound realization: every cent was mine. No one would comment on how I spent it or suggest I contribute more to household expenses, while my siblings' money remained their own. I deposited most of it, started an emergency fund, and used a small portion to buy myself a decent bed frame to replace the mattress on floor situation I had been living with. The weekends, once filled with family obligations and the constant background noise of a full house, became opportunities for exploration. I discovered a hiking trail just outside town that offered spectacular views of the river. I found a small bookstore cafe where I could spend hours reading without anyone interrupting me. I even started taking photographs again, something I had loved in college but had gradually abandoned under the weight of my mother's dismissive comments about wasting time on hobbies. About a month into my new life, Rachel knocked on my door holding a pot of something that smelled incredible. "I made way too much stew," she explained. "Thought you might want some." That evening turned into my first real social event in my new home. We ate at my small kitchen table, the conversation flowing easily from work stories to childhood memories. I kept mine carefully edited to dreams for the future. "So what brought you to Riverside?" she asked eventually. "It is not exactly a happening destination for 20-somethings. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Family situation went bad," I said finally. "Needed a fresh start." Rachel nodded, not pushing for details. Fresh starts are underrated. Sometimes you need to leave to figure out who you actually are without everyone else's expectations layered on top. Her words stayed with me long after she left. Who was I really? Without my family's expectations and limitations. Without the constant effort to earn love that was never going to be freely given. For the first time, I had the space to find out. As my second month of independence began, I made a startling discovery. I was happy. Not perfectly, not constantly, but genuinely happy in a way I could not remember being before. The challenges were real budget constraints, loneliness at times, the learning curve of total self-sufficiency, but they were my challenges faced on my terms. The apartment slowly became a home. I hung simple artwork on the walls, invested in better lighting to combat the apartment's inherent dimness, and even managed to keep a houseplant alive for more than 2 weeks. Small victories, but meaningful ones. Rachel and I fell into an easy friendship, occasionally sharing meals or watching movies together. There was a tentative attraction there, but neither of us rushed to define it, both seemingly content with the gentle evolution of our connection. "You seem different lately," she commented one evening, as we walked back from a local restaurant, more relaxed. "Do I? When you first moved in, you had this vigilance about you. Like you were constantly waiting for something bad to happen. It is not so noticeable now." I considered her observation. "I guess I am learning that not every environment is a minefield." She bumped her shoulder against mine companionably. "That is a good lesson to learn." By the 3rd month after my eviction, my new life had established its rhythms and routines. Work continued to be challenging but rewarding. My apartment, while modest, had become a genuine sanctuary, and my social circle, though small, provided more authentic connection than I had experienced in years with my blood relations. Not once during this time did I reach out to my family. Not once did they reach out to me. The silence between us stretched and solidified, becoming its own kind of statement. I was doing more than surviving without them. I was thriving. 3 months after being thrown out of my childhood home, I faced the most intense work challenge of my career. Our company had landed a major client, a financial services firm looking to completely overhaul their customer portal, and my team was responsible for the core architecture of the new system. The deadline was aggressive, the specifications complex, and the pressure enormous. "This contract could double our company size if we deliver," Marcus told me during a late-night strategy session, his usually relaxed demeanor replaced with focused intensity. "No pressure, but Actually, yes. Lots of pressure. I threw myself into the project with single-minded determination. Long days at the office became the norm. I started arriving before 7 in the morning, and often did not leave until 9 or 10 at night. The work was challenging but exhilarating, complex problems that required creative solutions, a team looking to me for leadership, and the growing confidence that came from making decisions that actually mattered. Amidst this professional whirlwind, something unexpected was developing in my personal life. What had started as friendly movie nights and casual dinners with Rachel was evolving into something deeper. Our conversations stretched later into the evening, our goodbye hugs lingered a bit longer, and the awareness of something unspoken growing between us became impossible to ignore. One Friday night, after I had somehow managed to leave work at a reasonable hour, I asked her to dinner at an actual restaurant rather than our usual takeout in one of our apartments. Like a date, she asked, her expression both teasing and serious. Exactly like a date, I confirmed, surprised by my own boldness. That evening was transformative. Away from our apartment building, dressed in clothes that were not sweatpants or work attire, we saw each other differently. Rachel wore a simple blue dress that made her eyes look impossibly bright. She laughed when I told her so, not dismissively, but with genuine pleasure at the compliment. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she said, taking in my button-down shirt and the new jeans I had splurged on. Though I have to admit, I kind of miss the exhausted programmer with takeout look. It has its own charm. Dinner was at a small Italian place where the pasta was homemade and the lighting kind enough to flatter everyone. We talked about everything and nothing. Her challenging student with unexpected artistic talent, my team member's brilliant solution to a coding problem, the terrible movie we had both independently started and abandoned on streaming the previous week. What we did not talk about was my family. It was the one area I still kept carefully walled off, afraid that revealing the full truth would somehow taint this new good thing in my life. After dinner, walking back to our building in the cool evening air, Rachel took my hand. Her fingers laced with mine felt like a small miracle. Simple human connection, freely offered without manipulation or conditions. That night, standing at her door, our first kiss was both unexpected and inevitable. When I finally returned to my own apartment, I felt lighter somehow, as if some long-held tension had finally released. The universe, however, was not quite done testing me. The very next day, while grocery shopping at the supermarket farthest from my old neighborhood, specifically to avoid this very scenario, I literally bumped carts with my brother Michael. The moment was surreal, reaching for the same box of cereal, only to look up and see the shocked face of my brother, his hair longer than when I had last seen him, his expression cycling rapidly through surprise, discomfort, and something that might have been guilt. "Jason," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Holy shit." "Michael," I replied, my own voice carefully neutral. "This is unexpected." An awkward silence stretched between us, filled with everything unsaid. Finally, he shifted his weight and asked, "How are you?" The banality of the question in the context of our last interaction, him standing silently by while I was thrown out of our home, was almost laughable. "I am fine," I answered simply. "You?" "Yeah, fine, good. You know." He gestured vaguely, then seemed to remember something. "You are not still staying at that scary motel, are you?" "Number, I have an apartment now. A job. A life." Each statement came out more pointed than I had intended. Michael had the decency to look embarrassed, look about what happened. It was not my idea. Mom just kind of decided. And no one thought to warn me or stand up for me. He stared at his shoes. "You know how she gets. Once she makes up her mind." "Right. And everyone just falls in line." Another uncomfortable silence fell between us. Then Michael glanced around and lowered his voice. "She has been telling everyone you abandoned the family, that you were ungrateful and just left one day." A cold wave of anger washed over me. "Of course she has. Most of the relatives do not believe her," he added quickly. "Uncle Dave especially. He called her out on it at Sunday dinner last month. I had always liked my father's brother. Good for him. Michael shifted uncomfortably again, then blurted out, "She sold Dad's watch to buy Amy a new phone after hers got stolen at a bar. I thought you should know." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. The watch, the one thing my father had specifically left to me, his most prized possession, was gone forever, casually converted into a replacement for Amy's carelessness. "I have to go," I said abruptly, abandoning my half-filled cart. "Have a good life, Michael." "Jason, wait." He called after me, but I was already walking away, moving on autopilot toward the exit, toward my car, toward somewhere, anywhere else. I do not remember the drive home. One moment I was leaving the grocery store, and the next I was sitting on the floor of my apartment back against the wall, struggling to breathe through what I would later recognize as my first panic attack. My chest felt tight, my heart raced, and the room seemed to spin around me. I must have called Rachel, though I do not remember doing so. She appeared in my apartment. She had a spare key for emergencies, and found me still on the floor, gasping for air. "Jason, what happened?" Her voice seemed to come from very far away. "Can't breathe," I managed to say. She knelt beside me, her hand warm and steady on my back. "Yes, you can. You are having a panic attack. Focus on my voice. Breathe with me. In for 4 counts, hold for 7, out for 8. She counted for me, her voice calm and sure, until gradually my breathing steadied and the room stopped spinning. I slumped against her, exhausted. "Do you want to tell me what triggered this?" she asked gently. And then, like a dam, breaking everything, poured out the full story of my family. The years of emotional neglect, the eviction, the garbage bags, and finally the encounter with Michael and the news about my father's watch. Rachel listened without interruption, her arm around my shoulders, her presence an anchor as I navigated the stormy waters of my past. When I finally fell silent, emotionally drained, she kissed the top of my head. "Your mother," she said with quiet intensity, "is a monster." The simple validation in those words broke something open inside me. I had spent so long making excuses for my family's behavior, minimizing the hurt, telling myself it was normal or that I was overreacting. Hearing someone else name the truth was powerfully freeing. That evening marked a turning point in our relationship. The walls I had carefully maintained came down completely. Rachel saw all of me, my pain, my damage, my resilience, and stayed anyway. The next day, as if the universe wanted to pile on more stress, our project at work hit a major technical obstacle. A core integration was failing, threatening to derail our entire timeline. My team looked to me for solutions, their faces showing varying degrees of panic. "We will figure this out," I told them with more confidence than I felt. "Let us break it down into components and tackle each issue systematically." For the next 3 days, I practically lived at the office, subsisting on vending machine snacks and the terrible coffee from our break room. Rachel texted regularly, making sure I was eating something resembling real food, and reminding me that there was a world outside of code. On the 3rd night, around 2 in the morning, I finally identified the elusive bug that had been causing our integration failures. The solution was elegant, in its simplicity once found, though it had taken days of painstaking work to uncover. As I was preparing to leave the office, my phone buzzed with a notification. My mother had called 6 times in the past hour. No voicemails, just repeated calls at increasingly frequent intervals. I stared at the phone, my heart rate accelerating again. Why would she be calling now after 3 months of silence? And in the middle of the night, my first thought was that someone had died, maybe Uncle Dave, or one of my grandparents. But something stopped me from calling back immediately. A new instinct for self-preservation that warned me this could be just another manipulation tactic. I texted Rachel, who was undoubtedly asleep, letting her know what was happening and that I was okay but unsettled. I drove home in the pre-dawn darkness, half expecting more calls, but my phone remained silent. When I reached my apartment, exhausted but too wired to sleep, I found a response from Rachel. Whatever she wants. Remember, you get to decide on your terms now. I am here for you, either way. Those simple words were like armor protecting me from the anxiety trying to claw its way back in. I fell asleep holding my phone. Rachel's message still on the screen. The next day, our project breakthrough led to rapid progress. The team's morale soared as we began to see the finish line on the horizon. Marcus brought in champagne at the end of the day, a premature but morale-boosting celebration of what we were about to accomplish. To Jason and his team of miracle workers, he toasted, raising his plastic cup, who somehow managed to turn a disaster into a triumph. The recognition felt good, unambiguous appreciation for work well done. No strings attached, no hidden resentments. This was what healthy recognition looked like, I realized. This was what I had been seeking from my family all those years without ever receiving it. That night at a proper celebration dinner with the team, my phone began buzzing again. More calls from my mother, now interspersed with text messages. Jason, call me back immediately. This is your mother. I know you are seeing these messages. Your behavior is completely unacceptable. We need to talk about your return home. The messages continued to arrive throughout dinner, each one more demanding than the last. I silenced my phone but could not help checking it periodically, watching the notification count climb. By the time I returned home that night, there were 60 messages from my mother, calls, texts, and even emails, all escalating in urgency and emotional manipulation. The final one simply read, "Where are you?" I showed the barrage to Rachel, who had come over after I texted her about the situation. "She does not ask if you are okay," Rachel observed, scrolling through the messages. "Not once. These are all about her needs, her feelings, her demands. I do not think she knows how to see beyond herself," I admitted. "Are you going to respond?" I considered the question carefully. Not tonight. Maybe not at all. I need to finish this project first and decide what, if anything, I want to say to her. Rachel nodded. "That is fair. You get to set the boundaries now." As I fell asleep that night with Rachel beside me for the first time, I realized something profound. My mother's desperate attempts to reestablish contact did not have the power over me they once would have. 6 months ago, I would have dropped everything to respond, eager for any sign that she cared. Now I recognized the messages for what they were: not concern for my well-being, but concern for her loss of control. I had changed, and that change, more than anything else, was the true beginning of my freedom. 6 months after finding my possessions in garbage bags at the gate, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined on that painful evening. The Nexus Wave project had been delivered on time, and to enthusiastic client approval, resulting in a substantial bonus for the team and a promotion for me to Director of Development, complete with a significant raise and expanded responsibilities. Rachel and I had grown closer through the challenges of the past months, our relationship deepening into something I had never experienced before. A partnership of equals built on mutual respect and genuine care. We had just signed a lease on a new apartment together, a bright, spacious 2-bedroom in a quieter part of town, with an actual view of the river and enough room for both her book collection and my growing home office setup. Professionally and personally, I was thriving. But there remained one unresolved aspect of my life: my family. In the 3 months since my mother's barrage of 60-plus messages, communication from my family had continued sporadically but persistently. My mother's approach cycled between guilt trips, angry demands, and occasional attempts at saccharine sweetness that rang hollow given our history. Amy had taken to sending me accusatory texts, essentially blaming me for breaking Mom's heart and tearing the family apart. Michael reached out less frequently but more genuinely, his messages awkward, but seemingly sincere in their attempts to reconnect. Most surprising were the messages from Megan, who had just turned 18. Her texts were thoughtful, often asking how I was doing, and sharing small updates about her life without pressure or agenda. "I miss you," she wrote in one message, "and I am starting to understand why you left." After careful consideration and many conversations with Rachel and Trevor, I decided it was time to address the situation directly. Not for my mother's sake, but for my own closure, and for Megan, who seemed to be seeking her own path out of the family dysfunction. I arranged to meet them at a coffee shop downtown neutral territory where I could leave if things went south. I deliberately scheduled it for mid-morning on a Saturday, limiting the potential duration of the encounter and ensuring I had plans with Rachel afterward as both a deadline and emotional support. When I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, I was surprised to find Megan already there sitting alone at a table by the window. "They are coming," she assured me quickly as I approached. "I just wanted to see you first. To say I am sorry. For everything." The simple sincerity in her voice brought an unexpected lump to my throat. "You do not have anything to be sorry for, Megan. You were just a kid." "I am still sorry," she insisted. "And I wanted you to know that before Mom arrives and turns this into the barber show." I laughed at her dead-on characterization, and for a moment it was like the past 6 months of separation had not happened. Megan had always been the most perceptive of my siblings, seeing the family dynamics with surprising clarity even as a child. Our private moment was short-lived. The cafe door swung open and my mother entered, followed closely by Amy and Michael. My mother had clearly dressed for the occasion, wearing what I recognized as her church and important meetings outfit. Amy looked like she had just come from a workout, her expression already set in disapproval. Michael hung back slightly, his posture uncomfortable. "Jason." My mother said my name, sounding like both an accusation and a claim of ownership in her mouth. "Finally, you decide to face your family." And just like that, the familiar tension returned, the weight of years of emotional manipulation settling back onto my shoulders. But this time I had something I had not had before. 6 months of freedom and clarity. 6 months of building a life where I was valued. 6 months of recognizing that the problem had never been me. "Hello, Mom." "Amy." "Michael." I gestured to the empty chairs. "Please sit down." My mother took the seat directly across from me, leaning forward with intensity. "So you have finally come to your senses. When will you be moving your things back home?" The bluntness of her assumption was almost comical. "I am not moving back home, Mom. I have my own home now. With Rachel." "Rachel?" Her eyebrows shot up. "Who is Rachel?" "My girlfriend. We live together." Amy made a small scoffing sound. "Of course you jumped right into living with some random girl, always looking for someone to take care of you." I turned to her with a calmness that seemed to surprise her. "Rachel does not take care of me, Amy. We take care of each other. That is what healthy relationships look like, though I understand that might be a foreign concept in our family." "Do not talk to your sister that way," my mother snapped. "I spoke to her exactly the way she spoke to me," I replied evenly. "If you want civility in this conversation, it needs to go both ways." My mother's eyes narrowed, unused to being challenged. "You have become disrespectful since you left." "No, I have become clear about what respect actually means. It is not the same as obedience or submission." Michael, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. "Can we just talk normally, without it turning into a fight in the first 2 minutes?" I nodded, grateful for the intervention. "That is why I suggested meeting. To talk. To establish where we go from here, if anywhere." "There is only one place to go," my mother insisted. "You come home, apologize for your behavior, and we put this unfortunate episode behind us." I took a deep breath, centering myself. "That is not going to happen, Mom. I have built a life that I value. I have a career that is going well. A relationship that makes me happy. And for the first time I live in a home where I am not constantly walking on eggshells." "So you are choosing strangers over your own family," she said, her voice rising slightly. "After everything I have done for you." "What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Especially in the past few years." The question was not accusatory, but genuinely curious. "Because from where I sit, you threw me out without warning, packed my possessions in garbage bags, kept or damaged sentimental items, and sold the watch Dad specifically left to me." My mother's face flushed at the direct confrontation. "I raised you. I fed you. Clothed you. Put a roof over your head. Basic parental obligations," I interrupted calmly, "and ones you fulfilled inequitably at best." "This is ridiculous," Amy interjected. "You have always played the victim, Jason. Poor, unappreciated Jason who never gets enough attention. I have all 67 of Mom's messages saved, I said, placing my phone on the table, plus all the texts from each of you. Would you like me to read them aloud here in the cafe? Let everyone hear the loving, supportive family communication. A flash of uncertainty crossed my mother's face. You are recording this. That is completely inappropriate. Not recording. Just not deleting. There is a difference. I slid my phone back into my pocket. I kept them because I needed to remind myself that I was not imagining or exaggerating what was happening. That the dynamic in our family was actually as unhealthy as it felt. Megan, who had been watching silently, spoke up. He is right, Mom. Things have not been right for a long time. My mother turned to her with shock. Megan, do not take his side in this. I am not taking sides. I am just saying what I see. Megan's voice was quiet but firm. The way you treated Jason was different. Is different. And the way you and Amy talk about him when he is not there. It is not fair. A heavy silence fell over the table. My mother looked genuinely stunned to hear this from her youngest, her favorite. Michael, perhaps sensing an opening, leaned forward. Look, can we just start over? Without the garbage bags and silent treatment and accusations? Can we try to be an actual family? I considered his question carefully. I am open to having relationships with each of you individually, on new terms, with clear boundaries and mutual respect. What does that mean exactly? My mother asked, suspicion evident in her tone. It means no more manipulation, no more favoritism, no more rewriting history to make yourselves the victims when you hurt me. It means acknowledging the past honestly, so we can decide if there is a future worth building. I want that, Megan said immediately. Me too, Michael added after a brief hesitation. Amy crossed her arms. This is stupid. You are asking us to apologize when you are the one who abandoned the family. I did not abandon anyone, I said quietly. I was thrown out with no warning, my possessions in garbage bags. I have the photo I took that day if your memory needs refreshing. My mother, seeing the conversation slipping from her control, tried a different approach. Her face softened into an expression I recognized from childhood, the look she used when she wanted to appear vulnerable to get her way. Jason, honey, I know things got out of hand. We all said and did things we regret. But we are family. Blood. That means something. It should mean something, I agreed. It should mean you treat each other with more care and respect, not less. It should mean you do not throw your son out without warning, and then expect him to come crawling back when you decide you are ready to see him again. My mother's expression hardened again at my refusal to capitulate. I see. So you are just going to hold a grudge forever. This is not about grudges. This is about whether we can build relationships based on mutual respect going forward. I took another deep breath. I have done a lot of thinking and some therapy in the past 6 months. I understand now that much of what happened in our family was not really about me at all. It was about Dad dying, and how that affected you, Mom. Her eyes widened slightly at the mention of my father. You changed after he died, I continued gently. And I think part of why you treated me differently is because I reminded you of him. I looked like him. I had his interests. I kept his memory alive in ways that might have been painful for you. That is not. She began, then stopped, something uncertain, flickering across her face. It is okay to admit that grief changed you, I said. What is not okay is how that grief was channeled into treating me as less worthy of love than my siblings. Tears welled in my mother's eyes, but I could not tell if they were genuine emotion or another manipulation tactic. With her, it was often impossible to separate the two. Michael cleared his throat again. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small envelope and slid it across the table. I found these in the attic. Thought you might want them. Inside the envelope were several photographs I had not seen in years. My father and me working on my first science project. The fishing trip we took when I was 10. the two of us grinning in matching Star Wars t-shirts at a convention. "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved by the gesture. "This means a lot." "About Dad's watch," Michael continued hesitantly. "I tried to buy it back from the pawn shop, but it was already sold." "I am really sorry, Jason." My mother's head snapped up. "You did what?" Michael met her gaze steadily. "I tried to get Jason's watch back. The one Dad left specifically to him in his will. The one you had no right to sell." The directness of his challenge to her visibly shocked my mother. This was new territory, someone other than me questioning her actions. I needed the money for Amy's phone," she said defensively. "It was an emergency." "It was a phone," Mom Megan said quietly. "Jason's watch was irreplaceable." Another silence fell heavier than before, as the dynamics between us shifted in real time. For perhaps the first time, my mother was facing unified pushback from more than one direction. I glanced at my watch, the inexpensive digital one I had bought to replace my father's heirloom. "I need to wrap this up. I have plans with Rachel at noon." "So that is it?" my mother demanded. "A 30-minute coffee. And you think we have resolved everything?" "Nothing is resolved," I said honestly. "This was a first step. Whether there are more steps depends on all of us, not just me." I stood gathering my jacket. "I am willing to have individual relationships with each of you based on how those relationships actually function. Megan, Michael, I would like to get to know you as adults outside of the family dynamic. Mom, Amy, I am open to communication if it comes without manipulation or blame. And if we do not agree to your terms," my mother asked, a challenging edge to her voice. "Then we continue as we have been these past 6 months," I replied simply. "I have built a good life. I would welcome you in it if you can respect its boundaries. But I do not need you in it to be happy anymore." That is the difference between now and 6 months ago. I could see from her expression that this was not the answer she had expected or wanted. She had come anticipating either full reconciliation on her terms, or the opportunity to paint me as unreasonable and herself as the wounded party. My calm clarity denied her both options. As I prepared to leave, Rachel appeared at the cafe door right on schedule. We had agreed she would arrive at this time as both support and a natural conclusion to the meeting. She waved but did not approach, giving me space to end things on my terms. "That is Rachel," I said, nodding toward the door. "I am going now. You all have my number. Use it respectfully, and we can see where things go from here." Megan stood and hugged me tightly. "I will call you tomorrow if that is okay." I would like that I told her sincerely. Michael offered his hand, which I shook. "I am sorry, man. For everything." Amy remained seated, her expression unreadable. My mother looked like she wanted to say something more, but for once seemed at a loss for words. I walked away from the table feeling lighter than I had expected. Not because everything was fixed, it was not, and might never be, but because I had finally spoken my truth without anger or desperation. I had set my boundaries clearly and without apology. Rachel was waiting by the door, her presence a reminder of the new life I had built, the healthy love I had found. As we left the cafe together, her hand warm in mine, I did not look back at the table where my family sat. Whatever happened next would be on new terms, my terms, or it would not happen at all. 1 year after finding my possessions in garbage bags, my life had undergone a transformation so complete, it sometimes felt like I was living someone else's story. The small beige apartment had been replaced by the riverside home Rachel and I shared, filled with color plants and the comfortable clutter of two creative people building a life together. My promotion to Director of Development had been followed by another, to Vice President of Technology, as NexusWave expanded rapidly following our successful project. Most significant, however, was the internal transformation. The anxious, approval-seeking person I had been always trying to earn love that should have been freely given had been replaced by someone more confident, more authentic, and ultimately more at peace. The aftermath of the coffee shop meeting with my family had played out in unexpected ways. True to her word, Megan had called the next day, and we had slowly built a real relationship as siblings and friends. Our weekly video calls became something I looked forward to, watching her navigate her first year of college with a confidence I admired. She was breaking free of the family patterns in her own way, choosing a university across the country and a major environmental science that our mother had dismissed as impractical. Michael and I had reconnected more tentatively. We met for lunch about once a month, our conversations gradually becoming less awkward, as we found common ground as adults rather than as the roles we had played in our family system. He had started therapy himself, beginning to unpack his own experiences as the invisible middle child who had learned to avoid conflict at all costs. My mother and Amy remained more problematic. After the coffee shop confrontation, they had maintained radio silence for nearly 2 months before my mother launched another campaign of communication, this time with a softer approach, sending cards and voicemails that walked the line between genuine remorse and subtle manipulation. I responded selectively, maintaining firm boundaries while leaving the door open for a healthier relationship if she could demonstrate real change. Amy remained openly hostile, occasionally sending accusatory texts that I learned to read and delete without emotional reaction. Her anger said more about her own insecurities than about me, a perspective that therapy had helped me develop. The most unexpected healing came through an unlikely channel. While organizing our move to the new apartment, Rachel and I had discovered a box of my father's papers that Michael had salvaged before my mother could discard them. Among them was a small leather notebook detailing my father's watch collection, including sketches, purchase information, and personal notes about each piece. The entry about the Omega he had left me was especially moving. Purchased on the day Jason was born, to be given to him when he becomes a man, or when I am gone, whichever comes first. May it remind him that time is precious, and so is he. Reading those words in my father's handwriting had brought both pain and closure. The watch itself was gone forever, but his intention, his love, remained documented in his own hand. I had the page professionally framed and hung it in our home office, a tangible reminder that I had been loved completely by at least one parent. Trevor's wedding that spring became an unexpected milestone in my healing journey. Standing beside him as best man, I found myself delivering a toast that was as much about my own journey as it was about his. Family, I said, raising my glass to the room filled with Trevor and his bride. Allison's loved ones is not just about blood. It is about who shows up for you in the hard moments, who celebrates your victories as their own, who sees you clearly and loves you anyway. I have been blessed to find that kind of family in unexpected places, with friends who became brothers and strangers who became home. The look Trevor gave me across the reception hall, part pride, part shared understanding of the journey we had walked together, was worth more than any inheritance. In therapy, I had worked through the complex grief of losing not just my father years ago, but the idea of what my family should have been. I learned that forgiveness did not necessarily mean reconciliation. I could release the anger and resentment I held toward my mother without allowing her back into a position where she could hurt me again. I could wish her healing without being responsible for providing it. The greatest act of self-love, my therapist had told me, is sometimes walking away from those who cannot love you properly. Those words had resonated deeply, helping me understand that my decision to build a life separate from my mother's influence was not selfish or ungrateful. It was necessary and healthy. Rachel and I had grown closer through each challenge and celebration. Her steadfast support during the family drama had evolved into a partnership that brought out the best in both of us. We talked about marriage occasionally, not with urgency, but with the comfortable certainty of two people who had found their person and knew it. "You know what I love most about us?" she asked one evening as we sat on our small balcony watching the sunset over the river. "We choose each other every day. Not out of obligation or habit, but because we want to." That distinction between choosing and being obligated had become central to how I understood relationships of all kinds. The family we build by choice often provides the love and support that should have come from the family we were born into. In a moment of reflection, I decided to send my mother one final message about our relationship, not from a place of anger or hurt, but from the newfound peace I had achieved. "Mom, I want you to know that I am doing well. I have built a life that makes me happy, and surroundings filled with people who value me as I am. I do not hold anger toward you anymore, though I still cannot understand many of your choices. I hope you find your own peace and healing. The door remains open for a healthier relationship if you ever feel ready for one based on mutual respect rather than control. With sincerity, Jason. She never responded directly to that message, though Megan told me it had affected her deeply. Some walls are too high to scale in one lifetime. Some patterns too ingrained to break. But my healing did not depend on her response anymore. On the 1-year anniversary of the day, I found my belongings in garbage bags. Rachel suggested we have a small gathering at our home, a rebirthday celebration with the people who had supported me through the journey. Trevor and Allison came along with Marcus and his wife, a few close colleagues who had become friends, and to my surprise, both Megan and Michael. That evening, standing in our living room surrounded by people who chose to be there, I found myself looking at a photograph on our mantel, an old family picture taken when my father was still alive, all of us smiling on a beach vacation. Beside it stood new photographs, Rachel and me hiking the team, celebrating our successful project, Trevor and Allison's wedding, Megan's college move-in day. The juxtaposition struck me as perfect, the past acknowledged but not controlling the present, the pain not erased but integrated into a larger story of growth and resilience. Sometimes we have to lose everything to find ourselves. Sometimes being thrown out is actually being set free. Those garbage bags at the gate were not the end of my story. They were the beginning of a better one. Have you ever had to walk away from something familiar to find something better? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life journeys of overcoming and thriving. And remember, sometimes the family you choose becomes the family you need. Thank you for listening. And until next time, keep writing your own story, not the one others try to write for you.